we've kind of already died, like this is the afterlife at the same time. I think it's a beautiful thing to realize that I don't think there is death. There is nothing to be afraid of. Like as life, you will only experience life. And because of that, you can just do whatever you want. You don't have to be afraid anymore. You're completely free, completely safe.
Hello and welcome to Going Beyond with Brittany. I'm your host, Brittany Bento, a tarot reader and psychic medium. And on this podcast, we dive into all things spiritual, mystical, and supernatural. So if that sounds like something up your alley, this is definitely the podcast for you. You can consider me your spiritual big sis or just your spiritual friend as we delve into conversations that aim to expand our mind and consciousness. I'm excited to have you here with me today, so let's dive into the episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm super excited because today we are going to be talking about psychedelics. Psychedelics, plant medicine, and we're just going to get into some stories. I have a guest. His name is Jack. He goes by Tripwhip on social media. I know he has TikTok, he has YouTube, Instagram, and his page is fascinating. I came across his page and he just has a bunch of stories about psychedelics. Keeping in mind, he is a big advocate for safety. He doesn't condone the use of illegal substances or anything like that. His videos are more so for educational purposes and to talk about the other side of the coin, because so often psychedelics and whatnot, they get a really bad reputation. They have a really bad rap, and psychedelics essentially really changed his life in a way, really opened up his perspective and changed things for him. And now he considers himself a little bit of a psychedelic activist or educator, something along those lines. And he had his first trip about 7 years ago and a lot of experiences ever since. He does research on other psychedelic stories, and it's really, really interesting. Stay tuned for that if that's something you're interested in. But before we jump into today's episode, I am going to give you guys a little bit of a life update. Nothing much has really changed since the last one, but a little bit. I actually booked tickets today to California. So I'm going to try to go to California for the second half of my stay, because for those of you that listen to my life updates, you know that I got turned away from the border when I initially tried to drive over the border. And instead I went to Vancouver Island. I've been here for the past few weeks. I'm here for about a month. And then in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to hop on a flight, fingers crossed, as long as they let me fly. And I'm going to fly to California for the second half of my stay. And I actually really feel called to come back to the island. I just feel like the universe was putting me here. Vancouver Island is huge. Okay, there's so many places to explore on here. So I think that after San Diego, I'm going to come back to the island. I mean, we'll see what happens. Again, I don't want to plan too much in advance, but my sister actually also canceled the Mexico trip. I was supposed to go to Mexico for the month of August. I might have talked about this in my last life update, but I wasn't even upset about it. I was kind of like, I don't know. I'm not surprised that this happened, essentially, is my point. And I'm just going with the flow. I'm trusting that what is meant for me won't pass me by. I'm trusting that there's a plan in all of this. I'm really starting to step into my psychic abilities more. That sounds weird, but I feel like a part of this trip of me being alone here is really helping me be alone and be receptive to messages from spirit. And I'm channeling more, and I'm starting to realize, holy shit, I get more than what I give myself credit for. And I'm starting to learn to trust the information that's coming through as opposed to questioning it. And spirit is leading me to kind of pull away from tarot, not to stop tarot, but to start to channel more just without cards and just to speak openly of what's coming through. And also writing as well. I channel through writing. So my personal gifts, I feel weird saying gifts because we're all spirit first, but my personal gifts are developing more. And I think that's a big reason for spirit redirecting me here. And that's something that I'm starting to realize, and I'm starting to step into my power more and realize how powerful I truly am. And I want you guys to know that you are truly powerful as well. It's a matter of stepping into that and believing that, because we have been conditioned to not believe in ourselves. We have been conditioned to give our power away. And when you start to reclaim that power, your life changes. So I'm stepping into that more. With that being said, enough of the life update. Let's jump into today's episode and let's give a welcome to Jack. Hello, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Jack, better known as Trip Whip. But thanks so much for being here with me today. How are you?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks for having me on. That's going to be fun.
It's Sunday morning for Jack. So if for those of you listening, you should be appreciative because who's doing work on Sunday morning. But I'm really excited to jump into today's episode. We're going to be talking about plant medicine, psychedelics, which we've talked about a few times on this channel before, but I came across Jack's TikTok relatively recently, and I remember just scrolling through his videos because the stories that you have on there, it's all basically dedicated to psychedelics. And before we dive into it too much, I do think we should give a little bit of a disclaimer. So for those of you listening, we're not promoting the use of any illegal substances. I've talked to you guys about this before as well. We're here just to have open-minded conversation. We're here for educational and entertainment purposes. But now that that little disclaimer is out of the way, let's jump in. How did the world of like psychedelics, how did that find you?
So for me, it was actually because I remember in high school, I was like trying to get in with this chick and she was smoking weed. So
it always starts with a girl, hey?
Yeah, pretty much. I started smoking weed just to like kind of be a contact for her. And it was kind of fun, but at the time I was really arrogant, really closed-minded, not spiritual at all. And so I feel like that affects your trips. And when I was smoking weed at that time, just nothing really profound was happening. It wasn't until somebody came over my house, like a friend of a friend, and they had synthetic weed, which they were pretending was real weed. And so they gave me some. I smoked it like I would any other bud. And just it was such a like insanely intense experience, like full ego death, all sorts of, but in a really weird way. And I think even though it wasn't spiritual or it wasn't really like, I wouldn't say it was even a good trip. I don't think there was many positives from it. It just showed me that there was like a whole like realm of experience that I'd never thought was possible. So after that, I started doing some research. I didn't do synthetic weed, but eventually I found acid, and that kind of just rewired the way I thought. It made me far more open-minded, spiritual, and then I had a lot of like toxic stuff going on as well, and it just started healing me. Yeah.
Wow. So it's so funny that you say it started in high school, which is probably common for most people. I was raised super Catholic. So when I was in high school, I thought weed was equivalent to cocaine. So I did not touch any of that stuff until I was in university. And then from there, my mind started opening a lot as well. And it's funny that you say it introduced you to kind of a whole other realm, because I think that's kind of like the biggest thing. And there's such a negative connotation when it comes to drugs just in general. But with psychedelics, I think it gives us access to parts of our brain we normally wouldn't have access to, and it just completely opens your perspective and just perception of life essentially. But you said you did acid after that, and I've actually never done acid before. The only psychedelics I've done are mushrooms and DMT.
Right.
So I've smoked weed as well, but I guess I don't consider that psychedelic. I don't know if I've done synthetic weed before because I've never had any sort of like psychedelic experience with weed, but I'm curious about, I guess, like the differences between the trips and what that's like for you, but also your first acid experience, because you said that that was kind of like your most profound, or not most profound, but one of the first really profound experiences you've had.
Yeah, that's a fun question. For the acid one first. So the thing about that was, I remember like being really disappointed at first. I had only experienced synthetic weed before that as my only like psychedelic experience. And even though that wasn't like really fun, it was just kind of terrifying. It was so intense. I just kind of wanted to go through that again. Or like I wanted to go through something very intense again. Because I don't know, I knew that I was arrogant, and I knew I was just kind of closed-minded, and I wanted something to open my mind. And I remember as the acid was kicking in, like I was so disappointed because it was so much like weaker than I was expecting, but then I couldn't stop like smiling. Like I had this smile and this like laughter I could not get rid of. And then finally I just walked outside, and it was like barely anything had really changed, except everything just looked incredibly beautiful. And it was like the first time I'd seen like the beauty that was around me. And it didn't feel fake. It didn't feel like this was just the drug, you know, it felt like I could actually see the beauty that was always around that I could never actually normally see. So when I was sober, I found that it had actually had a really profound effect. You know, once the acid wore off, I was just more like appreciative of everything around me. Just like subtle, not intense experience at all. But from there, it kind of just changed how I was sober as well. It kind of stopped me from being depressed. And then eventually I just, you know, I don't take psychedelics anymore, but I feel like I'm a much happier person than before I ever took them. What was the other question? The first one about the trips?
Oh yeah, like the difference between, I guess, like acid, mushrooms, DMT.
That's right. Yeah. I found that acid and mushrooms are super similar. I'd say, at least for me, I think mushrooms, I could feel it in my system less. And it kind of felt like it was like changing my thoughts maybe a little bit more than acid was. But the more I started taking psychedelics, the more similar each one became. So it was like there was way less difference between acid and mushrooms eventually.
Right.
Even weed got in there at some point. Like I'd say when I started meditating on all of them, weed took me to very similar places. And then DMT was its own thing. Obviously, you've done DMT, and then DMT just takes you like, you know, to a very high dose.
It's like immediate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're all super similar. I'd say with DMT, if I was to compare it to the other two, you'd have to take a really high dose of acid. And I've never done like a really high dose of mushrooms. So I couldn't compare it.
Can I ask what the highest dose is you've taken, if you're comfortable sharing that?
No, it should be. I've talked about it on TikTok quite a bit. So I'd say acid, it's hard to say what the highest dose was, but like apparently it was 1,000 micrograms, which was, it was like 3 very strong tabs. And then mushrooms, it was like 4 grams. I think that was my highest dose on mushrooms.
Okay, yeah. No, fair enough. 4 grams is a heavy dose of mushrooms. I think they
it was fun. Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's a trip for sure. But I'm curious, and we'll get into some of these stories because I'm really curious about some of like the psychedelic stories that maybe you've experienced, but also I know you hear crazy stories as well from other people. But I'm curious why, because you mentioned that you don't do psychedelics anymore. Is it kind of one of those things where you've done, I guess, so much of it that you feel like, I don't know, like I don't want to say nothing more to learn because we're forever learning and growing, but you've gotten what you needed out of it?
Yeah, no, that's what it is. I think I do sense that like at some point I probably start tripping again. But you know, I feel like it got to a point where it was just kind of starting to repeat the same messages. I think one of my last trips, I used to meet these entities on like, it didn't matter what psychedelic I'd take.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was really weird because like at some point I started going, like I felt like I was going a bit crazy because, well, not really, but like it sounds crazy when I explain it. I'd be like watching a movie or something, and I just feel like the entities would put my attention onto the film, and they'd be like, we're going to answer you now through this movie or something like that. And then one of my last trips, it was like Frasier was just on the TV, and it was like the last episode of Frasier. And I remember he was just like saying goodbye to everybody. And it was just before I'd been talking to myself, like while meditating. And the message I was kind of receiving was like, I need to take a break. And there's a lot of things that I want to do and get done. And I just need more time for. And then the message came on the TV, was like, goodbye for now. Like, hopefully one day we'll see each other again. And then I did have another trip, but I never saw the entities. They never appeared again. That was the last time. And so at that point I was like, all right, I'm going to stop tripping and just do what they're telling me to do.
That's so interesting. So like I feel like I've had some pretty wild experiences on psychedelics, and I've met entities as well. But I'm curious if these entities that you've met, have you like seen them visually in front of you type of a meeting, or is it these beings that like, I call them like beings, I guess, beings, entities, same. But I feel they're there even though I don't see them, but I know that they're there. But there was one experience on DMT where there was an entity there.
Yeah.
I was like, my eyes were closed and I was like astral projecting, like I was not in my body,
Yeah.
but I visually saw this. It was a female, but looked very cartoony. Like I can't even, it's hard to verbally like explain the stories afterwards because I feel like words just don't do it justice.
Yeah.
And I forget a lot of it, to be honest. Like there's a lot that like I forget after.
Mm.
But there was only that one time I visually had an entity, I guess, in front of me. But every other time they're just like,
You feel them.
there, but you don't see them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, did you feel them before you saw it on DMT?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember. I've done DMT a few times, and only one time did I see it in front of me. And I don't remember if it was weird. I felt more like I was observing something.
Okay.
But I felt like this entity didn't really interact with me.
Okay. Was she like the same? You know how you're saying you feel entities around you. Was she like one of those entities? Did she feel like one of those entities or like something else?
No, I felt like I was just like watching her.
Okay. I
And she was staring at me. Like she was aware of me as well.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I like saw something.
Right.
And it was just like really interesting for me at least.
No, I was just asking because it sounded similar to me. Mine was I at first could only feel them. So like on acid, it happened. I did combine. I was kind of reckless in the beginning, and there just wasn't a lot of information out there. So I say some of the stuff I did. As we were saying before, we don't advocate any of this, but early days, I combined acid and mushrooms. And that was the first time that I felt like I kind of had like entity contact. And it felt like it was almost like entity possession. It was very weird. There was like these moments where I just black out.
Oh, wow.
But I happened to be like doing this like video entry. And then I watched the video entry back later, and the moments where I was kind of blacking out, I was actually talking, and I was talking as like one of these beings. It was kind of very weird.
Shut up. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. But it was just me. Like it sounded like it was just me talking, but I was saying, I'm this alien. We're all aliens, and it was just kind of weird stuff. But that was like the first time I had like the sense of like something else. And every time I would trip, I would feel them. I could feel like there were these entities in the walls just watching or something. And then I had my highest acid trip, which was on my TikTok. I like, stripped naked, started running through the streets, and I was just like, like so happy.
I think I saw that video.
It's super common. Apparently it happens a lot.
I actually have a friend who did the exact same thing as you. Did you end up in the hospital? Because he ended up in the hospital.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Same story. Sorry.
Well, I call it the Truman Show effect because it's like, it's so common. There's another name for it, but like people just, for whatever reason, strip naked, run outside, and they just want to like tell everybody what they're feeling, which is exactly what I did. And so, my neighbors came out and they were literally like trying to calm me down, but I saw them as these entities, and they were coming up to me and they were like celebrating. They were like, congratulations, you've made it to this place. Like, welcome.
No, yeah.
And, once the trip was over, it was really hard for me to know what I was just experiencing. A couple of weeks later, I had DMT, and that's when I felt like I finally saw these entities, and they came up. And what was weird on that acid trip, they actually, like the people who were coming up to me, they were telling me that once you go back inside the house, you're going to turn into white light, and it's going to be like a near-death experience for you. And I was kind of like getting this like sense of what it was going to be like, and I was getting pretty scared. And so I was tripping with my friend at the time. And I was like, can I bring him with me? And they were like, yeah, it's okay. You can bring whoever you want. And they're really specific. They were like, once you go back inside and sit on the couch, you're going to turn into white light. And that didn't happen during that trip. The ambulance came, took me away. But then when I did DMT, very quickly, these entities, and I could see them, came up to me and they were like, okay, we're taking you to the white light now. And I was with my friend, like Aiden, he was sitting next to me. He was the one who gave me the DMT, and I blasted off, became this white light forever. And then, I came out and I was actually inside my body again, running through the streets naked when I came out of the white light. But it was just a memory, I realized. But yeah, weird connections.
It's crazy because, when you were running through the streets naked, because my friend, for example, he said that when this was happening, he felt like he wasn't in control of his body. He's like, I felt like my soul was somewhere else. Was that similar for you, or did you feel like you were choosing to do that, but you were just in another reality, essentially?
Pretty much. I think it was more like I was very with it. It was like I was talking to my inner voice the whole time. And it wasn't feeling like me anymore. And I remember before this happened, there was like this hell freaky moment where I was like with my friend and we were in the car together, and the voice was like talking to me, and it was like, you know, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it's something like, I can show you my power if you want, or I can show you like a taste of my power. And literally everything just froze, like everything paused, like everything outside went completely quiet. Like no birds were chirping anymore. And like my friend was just sitting next to me smiling, and we had the radio on, but the radio went silent. And then as soon as I started to like laugh, because I was just like, this is hilarious. My whole life's a joke. The voice was also explaining, it was like, the reason this is possible is because like you're creating a reality. Like each one of us is creating our reality, and we create it so like beyond what you realize. It's so much more subjective than you realize. Then I started like laughing, and then the people on the radio started laughing. My friend Aiden started laughing, and like all the sound came back.
Today's podcast is brought to you by a very special sponsor, Lucky Moon Crystal Bar. Behind this inspiring brand is a story of resilience and transformation. Meet Serenity, the founder of Lucky Moon Crystal Bar, a visionary who turned her personal challenges into a beautiful journey of healing and self-discovery, and where Serenity found solace in the healing power of crystals. This online treasure trove offers a hand-picked collection of high-quality crystals aimed at fostering healing, spiritual growth, and a deeper connection with your higher self. And we are all for that here on this podcast. Serenity has created a space that not only offers beautiful crystals, but also cultivates a sense of community and belonging. Whether you're a crystal enthusiast or just starting your crystal journey, Lucky Moon Crystal Bar welcomes you. And here's something extra special for just our listeners. Use code Brittany15 for an exclusive 15% off on your first order. Visit their website and start your healing journey today. The website and the code and everything will be linked in the show notes and in the description box below. But let's jump back to the episode. And it's crazy because like I believe that like that can happen. And I know that sounds crazy for those listening, whatever. But like I believe in like the other realms, whatever you want to call it, like wholeheartedly. And I know that they are so much more powerful than we realize. Like we are more powerful than we realize. You know what I mean? Like time is an illusion. I believe time's an illusion, and we do create our reality like this. And it's funny because I channel messages, and one of the messages that I got, this is not on psychedelics, was essentially like what you were saying is everyone's realities is very, very different because it is subjective. Like your reality is very different than mine.
Yes.
Is very different than everybody's. Like we create it quite literally. So it's like, you know, with these messages that I get, it's like, there's a difference between being like, oh yeah, like everyone's reality is different, and being like, oh, everyone's realities are different, and like really understanding like some of these messages. I feel like psychedelics kind of help you understand some of these things that I guess people talk about that are, I don't know, does that make sense? That are like a little...
No, 100%. 100%. Yeah, like that's what this, it was the same sort of message. And that's why I was like running, you know, around to my neighbors, was because like at some point I was like, none of this matters. Like I'm creating my reality. I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to be afraid of other people's judgments, you know? And so I was like, what do I want to do? The first thing was like, let's just take off my clothes. And I just ran out and started celebrating.
Because the message was like, you can literally do whatever the hell you want. But it's kind of like what's like the term I'm looking for? You know, when you got like pushed in like head first, you know what I mean? Like there wasn't like a slow introduction. Like you were running through the streets naked, which, you know, is funny laughing at it now. But I'm sure at the time, like that's, I mean, if I did that, I know for myself, I would just be like, I have no words. I don't know how I would react to coming to terms with that.
It's hard.
I bet.
Especially because it wasn't like at a friend's place. It was like my place.
Yeah,
So it was like with my neighbors who I'd known for like a long
totally.
time. And, after that, it was pretty awkward, like trying to say hello to them. Like,
Yeah, totally.
and it made it hard. It like, I think it made me feel like I was like betrayed by psychedelics a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge with psychedelics, is that they are sometimes like, that's the problem with psychedelics, is that the messages are really strong. When I was with my ex-girlfriend, we're tripping,
Mm.
and I was like, all of a sudden, like, oh, you know what? If we're in an open relationship, it won't bother me. Like, I'm totally fine with that. Like, I want you to be free. And then as soon as I sober up, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really down for that at all.
Yeah.
So it's hard integrating the psychedelic messages with the sober messages, and knowing what to like integrate, and how much is just going to be too challenging.
Totally. And it's funny that you talk about, open, with your ex-girlfriend. One of the messages you got was, I would be okay with being in an open relationship. I think about this actually all the time, because in society, like us humans, we've made all of these rules, right? And one of those rules that we've made, because everything in this world is essentially human, like ideologies, et cetera, et cetera. They had to start from a person, and we just kind of went along with it. And now it has become the norm. And with relationships, I think marriage, nothing against marriage. Maybe I'll get married one day, maybe I won't. I don't know. I talk about this all the time. We'll see. I always say, who knows what future Brittany will want. But essentially, like, marriage, I feel like, is such a human thing. I think that we're meant to have more than one connection with other souls, and I think that, like, forcing yourself to just be with one person, is very limiting. Like what you said is, be free. I should be free, right? But then it's like, coming back, we're so accustomed, we're so, what's the word, like, based since we were raised, right? It's all we know, and it's really hard to like strip away those layers. I guess psychedelics has really helped me strip away a lot of constructs built from society.
Have you always been like that? Have you always, like, was it psychedelics that kind of opened you up a little bit, or have you always kind of been like very open-minded from the get-go?
Yeah, so I've always been quite open-minded. I mean, I used to see spirits as a kid. So for me, the spiritual realm was always very real. And I was raised super Catholic. I don't consider myself Catholic or religious at all anymore. Like, I'm very spiritual, but being raised Catholic, I was raised in an environment where God existed. Like, there was otherworldly things of existence. But with my upbringing, it was like, demons, you should be fearful. So, I've been communicating, and what I'm learning now as I'm stepping into, I guess, I don't like to say gifts, because we're all spiritual beings. We all have the ability to connect, but I feel like it's what I'm here to do. And I'm stepping into that now. And I'm realizing that I've been doing this my whole life, but I just thought it was normal because I didn't know any different. And now I'm starting to understand it more without those rules that were kind of instilled, because before it was like, I should stay away from that. That's evil. That's this, that's that. You know what I mean? So I've always been open-minded, but psychedelics has helped me strip away from my upbringing surrounding the realm in that world. And does that make sense?
No, totally. Yeah, because like, if you're raised Catholic, obviously open relationships isn't normally something that's like encouraged.
No, not at all. Like, you go to hell if you have sex before marriage, or you know what I mean? There was a lot of fear just kind of instilled. And I mean, I don't know what I want in relationships. I'm like, would I want an open relationship? Like, because of my views and perspectives, like, I believe that us souls are supposed to have connections with more than one person. So, like, ideally, I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't hold on to someone, and I would have that like detachment, but be able to have those relationships. But like you said, in the reality of it, that's a lot more difficult when you actually try to like implement that. So like, the question, like, for me, it's like, I don't know exactly what I would do. We'll find out as time goes, but my perspective has completely shifted. And a big reason, I think, is because of the psychedelics. Because for me, psychedelics is more so recent in my, I guess, experimentation. Like, I've only really started doing them a year ago. I was not happy because I was a high school teacher for 5 years. And I was already on this journey of, I'm trying to manifest getting out of teaching, this and that. And then I did mushrooms. And I was like, holy shit. I was astral projecting. The beings showed me like this I don't even know how to explain it, this like plug-in room. And they're like, you're plugged into this reality right now. It's as simple as unplugging and plugging your reality into somewhere else.
Wow.
Yeah. And I
Wow.
realized like, holy shit, this life that it is seemingly so big and this job that is seemingly so important really is nothing. Like the fear that I have around quitting is absolutely nothing. So it was that experience that gave me the courage, the extra courage that I needed. It was like the push to quit my job and to dive into doing readings full time.
Wow. So like how long after did you like quit your job from that trip?
So that trip was in August and I was set to go back to work in September. And I couldn't just like quit right away because I needed to make my website. I needed, like, there was that transition period. So, and I needed to give my notice, but I gave my notice like the first week going back to teaching. Like I gave my notice right away. Yeah. And then my last day of teaching was the end of September. So I went back to teaching for that 1 month. And then ever since October of 2022, I've been just doing readings full time for people. And I completely changed my life. And it was the psychedelics that gave me that extra push. And I'm saying they gave me that extra push because I knew I needed to do that already. Like I knew that was the trajectory I was headed on. However, nobody in my life supported it. You know, I'm on TikTok, you're on TikTok. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I don't make money off of TikTok. You know what I mean? Like it's not lucrative. So it's not like, you know, oh yeah, you could quit. You make money off TikTok anyways. It's like, are people going to want to book readings with me regularly? I don't know. Am I going to make enough money? I don't know. It was a huge risk. And nobody supported it. But like after that mushroom trip, I believed in myself, period. Like, and that's all I needed. I just needed that confidence boost. And it was one of the best things I could have ever done for myself.
Wow. That's wicked. That's a really cool trip.
Yeah.
That's a really cool trip.
With my trips, they're all very much so spiritual. It's like I prepare ahead of time.
Yeah.
I meditate ahead of time. I set an intention. So I've been pretty lucky because my heaviest dose of mushrooms, I took 5.55 grams, which for me, I mean, 5'0" nothing, 120 pounds. That was heavy. That was a heavy dose.
Yeah,
and I had a really profound trip, but it got to be a little negative in a way, or it was going down into like bad trip territory. But like, because I was so aware, it's like I knew that I would be okay and I knew that there was a lesson in it and I knew that it would pass. So like I went with it and I let it happen and nothing really scary really came about. But I'm curious if you could, whether it be one of your trips or one of like the stories or whatever you want to share, what would be an example of a bad trip, I guess? Because for those listening, again, we're not promoting this, but for those who do ever experiment, it's like, I mean, I think there's always a lesson with it, but it can go south, so to speak.
I think the worst trip, actually, no, I think the one bad trip that I'd like to talk about, I haven't talked about it on TikTok yet, but it was that 4-gram mushroom trip. And it wasn't really a bad trip. You know, a lot of people will say a bad trip, it's actually one of the best trips because it can do a lot of good for you. And I think that can be the case, but you have to like really understand that the bad trip is happening for a reason. And I don't know if this is the case with every trip, but for me, it was so clearly linked to something I had done that I was ignoring and running away from. And it was like, you know, yourself, you were saying how you have all these rituals that you do before you have a trip. That was me at a certain point as well. I didn't get it straight away, but eventually I kind of got there as the psychedelics helped me be a little bit more spiritual and stuff. And so for this 4-gram mushroom trip, which was going to be my highest mushroom trip, I completely ignored all of those rituals. I just went, like, woke up one day, I was like, I don't have anything planned today. I'm bored. I'm just going to do the rest of the mushrooms in my fridge, which like I knew was a terrible idea. You know, like I just knew it. And as soon as it started kicking in, I was like, I hope this doesn't get more intense. Like it was just making the lights a little bit brighter. And immediately I'm resisting it, which was like, why did I even just take the highest dose of mushrooms? Like what was my headspace? But it was like something inside of me knew I was about to give me a bad trip and knew that I needed that bad trip. And so I took it, started fighting it, which is just like a recipe for a bad experience. It's literally, you know, fear is what gives you a bad trip. And the psychedelics will just amplify that fear to like a ridiculous degree. And so I'm experiencing this fear. I go back inside my room, and this is after my high dose of acid. So I'm wondering, like, if I can, do whatever I want and feel however I want to feel, why am I feeling like this? How can I stop this? I know I can stop this. What do I need to do? And eventually I had this, like, because it just felt like hopeless. Like there was just like nothing felt good, and it just felt like a very intense depression. And so I had this like thought that was just like, it's okay. Like we can make this positive. And I just like latched onto that thought. I was like, all right, let's get into a new room, and I'm just going to do whatever I need to do. I'm just going to rock back and forth for the next couple of hours and just remind myself it's going to be okay. Just like take it 10 seconds at a time. And it was just like, just by setting the intention to make it positive from negative, then my brain worked out why I was having this negative trip. And my friend messaged me, and it was a friend who I'd like really badly wronged about a month before this trip. And I just hadn't really like acknowledged that fact within myself. And he just messaged me saying that he was in hospital because he just self-harmed. I just like felt this like intense guilt and realization for like my part in this. And I literally just like wrote him these paragraphs of an apology. And as soon as I apologized, the bad trip stopped. It was like the curse had been lifted. That was it. That's all I had to do, was realize what I'd done wrong, apologize, and then that was that. And the rest of the trip was good. It went back to being normal, basically. But that helped me realize a couple of things. For one, resistance is definitely one of the key ingredients for a bad trip. But also that, there is definitely some truth in that, negative experiences are probably due to something underlying that hasn't been treated, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I say I don't like saying bad, quote unquote, bad trip, because there's a reason for all of it. But it's like a tough lesson, right? Like one of those hard lessons, essentially. Like they're, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's like they're not necessarily going to go easy on you. But it sounds like you had a bit of an ego death in a way. Like it sounds, like it let you, like that experience in particular, let you go to a place that you maybe wouldn't have been able to without like that little bit of help or encouragement.
It's hard to say because like there's like the ego death that is like the psychedelic like ego death sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's like just it did kill my ego. Like it killed that part of me
Yeah.
that was like lying to myself, which is kind of the ego. So in that way,
Yeah.
definitely it was a massive ego death. And that's still something that I have to work with today. I'm really grateful for that experience, because I think had I not had it, you really can just go about like your life thinking you're always the right person, like, or that you're always in the right when you're doing so much wrong. That was just such a humbling experience for me to realize that I am really capable of like harming people if I don't, keep myself in check, sort of thing. And that's something psychedelics are good for. They can help you like recognize your own unhealthy patterns. I don't know if you ever went through anything like that though.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Honestly, for me, and this sounds very sad, but like it's really made me realize that I didn't love myself. It's like when they say hurt people, you know what I mean? Like that type of a thing. I didn't fully love and accept myself for all that I was. And that came out in ways like I attracted situations into my life where other people wouldn't treat me the best. And I would always see myself as a victim. Like I'm always so like, cause I was always like a very nice person, overly nice to people, like to my own sacrifice. You know what I mean? And because of that though, it's like, I would just play the victim, like, oh, they're just the asshole. They're just this. And I didn't take any responsibility for my part. So it kind of really opened my eyes up to that in a way as well. And then I started realizing like it all starts within, and I need to not have this victim mentality, and I need to take ownership for everything that has happened in my life because I've manifested it, the good and the bad, and that's a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow, I think.
Yeah, very true. Like that's actually like one of the messages I'm kind of afraid to talk about, because I think a lot of people get upset with you. It's almost like as soon as you say, listen, you're in control of your life and therefore you're the reason why you're suffering. A lot of people don't want to hear that. And it's fair I can sympathize, because I'm sure there are tons of people who are suffering way more than me. And I know when you, like, the worse it is that you're suffering, the harder it is to get out of that. And the harder it is to, think positive thoughts, which is like, means nothing to somebody who's depressed. When they're like, how do I get out of this? You're like, think positively. They're like, what does that even mean?
And let's take a moment to say thank you to today's sponsors. Today, we are once again sponsored by Sue from Diamonds Natural Store. Thanks again, Sue, for sponsoring today's video. Diamonds Natural Store is an all-natural pet food store based out of Illinois. But if you're not from Illinois, that's okay. You can order online as well. And there is actually free shipping on all orders over $25. Diamonds Natural Store is named after Diamond, who was Sue's dog, who unfortunately passed away. But because of Sue, Diamond's name will live on forever. There's a truly heartwarming story behind that, so definitely check out their website and read the story if you haven't yet. But Diamond's Natural Store has dog toys, cat toys, bird supplies for all of your furry friends. They have all natural treats. They also have all natural supplements, some of which include probiotics, prebiotics, liver support, and mushroom supplements. So check out Diamond's Natural Store. The link to the website will be in the show notes and in the description box below. But let's jump back to today's episode.
As crazy as it sounds that I'm running through the streets and being congratulated by people, it's like, that's my headspace is feeling completely free. And the reality that I was literally just manifesting before my eyes were what was a reality where people were coming up and meeting that insane hectic energy, and it's like, I just feel like that's as crazy as that example is, I feel like that's always happening. Wherever you're at mentally, your reality is just reflecting that back to you. That's why it's like, it's as easy as unplugging it and tuning into something else. It's like, as soon as you change it, you change your reality, which is hard. Like, I'm still trying to integrate that message now.
And no, it's 100% true. The disconnect with a lot of people, though, is they don't give themselves enough time for that new reality to really set in. Like, this has been proven where your brain, like, and I'm probably not going to explain the terms very, very well, but essentially the video was talking about how your brain, based on how you were raised and based on all of the beliefs that you've been brought up with through, teachers, parents, society, media, et cetera, it's built these like neural pathways in your brain. So if there's a neural pathway that believes, my life sucks, my life sucks, my life sucks, your brain believes that. And those are like the pathways that have been created. You can change that. Like, you have the ability to change that, but you need to say, like, my life is awesome. It's going to create a new pathway. And then your brain's going to be like, oh, that's not true, based on past experiences, based on the other pathways that are there. So it'll get rid of the my life is amazing. But with repetition and repetition and repetition, which is time, and this is where most people go wrong, they don't give themselves enough time. They just say, oh, it's not working, this is hocus pocus. But with time, it'll actually create a new pathway that your brain will believe, and it'll get rid of the old ones. So it's repetition and consistency and time. And so many people just don't give enough time. And, instant gratification, we want to see it right away. And if we don't see it right away, we give up. And that goes for manifestation as well, because manifestation starts out with the thought. Essentially, you need to fully believe that you are whatever it is that you're trying to attract. And when you align with that frequency, that's when you bring that in. But it's a matter of fully believing it. It's like, if you want to manifest $1 million, you can, but you need to fully believe that you are capable of manifesting $1 million. And you could say to yourself all day, I'm going to manifest $1 million, but until you believe it, it won't happen. And the believing it part will come in increments over time. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's actually quite helpful for me, because, like, I think this is something like a message I need as well at the moment. So, like, when you quit your job, did you, like, as a teacher, did you go through doubt in the beginning phases there at all? Or were you like steadfast, your mind was just like locked on, and like you knew the outcome?
Yeah. I knew the outcome, because leading up to that point, there was, me and my ex had broken up earlier that year. And because of that, my life completely changed, like completely changed. And from that, a lot of growth happened. And I essentially found my purpose. Like, that sounds so cheesy, but I found my purpose, and I realized, like, this is what I am supposed to do. And then through the psychedelics, it gave me that extra courage necessary, because it, made me really understand that we really are creating our reality. With that said, I wholeheartedly knew, but I'm still human. Do you know what I mean? I still have the ego. And when I talk about the ego, that's the ego will keep you in your comfort zone. It'll convince you that you can't contain more than what you want, because, it comes out as fear, and the ego will come out in very innocent ways. Like, for example, like my friends and family that didn't support me, it was very much so, oh, you should stay with your secure job, with your stable job. That if I listened to the ego, I would have stayed in my comfort zone and I would have stayed there. But
Wow.
by acknowledging and understanding, no, that is my ego. I have these, I'm a little fearful, but I know that that's simply my ego. And I knew that if I didn't let that win, I would be successful. So I was wholeheartedly invested, but I still had those, I guess, doubts, but I knew that the doubts were my ego, which essentially was a lie.
So for like people who maybe have like more doubt than yourself, would you just say keep repeating like an affirmation each day, or like what would you recommend for that?
No, that's a good question. Definitely affirmations help, but I think that do what you can to build up your confidence to fully believe in your ability to accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish. But that is going to look different for everybody, because our realities, again, are different. So what works for you might not work for your friend, and vice versa. Affirmations might really be a good thing for some people. But for other people, it's, if you're trying to become a famous actor, for example, it's like, okay, realistically, to become in alignment with the energy, the frequency of a famous actor, you need to believe you're a famous actor. So you need to go to an audition. You might not get the audition. Okay. That might knock your confidence. And then eventually you get an audition, you get the booking that's going to build your confidence up a little bit. And then the next one, it's going to build it up more. So it's like, what can you do to build your confidence up as an actor so that you are embodying that? Maybe it's affirmations, maybe it's whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? And that will look different for everyone, but it's not giving up, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. That makes sense. I think I feel like also in that way, then like actions would be like, even if you're feeling that fear, and even if you are doubtful, I feel like if you take an action that isn't in alignment with the doubt, it's like it's showing that deep down you actually do believe in yourself, and so hopefully you can like then bring out that confidence, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah. Like, so many people talk about the law of attraction, but they don't talk about the other laws of the universe. Like, there's 12 laws of the universe. The law of action is actually one as well. And it's kind of like what you're talking about. You have to take action. Without action, it's like if you're trying to manifest $1 million, unless you believe that it's going to fall out of the sky, it's not just going to land on your lap. You have to take inspired action. But often inspired action is good. It might make you a little nervous. It might push you out of your comfort zone. But it's taking action on those things and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, because you're not going to change within and build that belief more without making yourself uncomfortable. It's like going to the gym. If you want to see results, you have to actually break a sweat consistently for an extended period of time before you start seeing those results. And it'll come in slowly. You're not going to wake up tomorrow with a six pack. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it takes time. So that's kind
Yeah.
of like the analogy that I like to use.
Yeah, that's totally. And I think as well for me, like, I don't know about you, but there's almost a part of me that feels like your reality is like a complete manifestation. It's like almost like a
Oh, yeah.
dream sort of thing. And so a lot of people, when I would say that, they'd be like, well, I want, $1 million. Let's say I want $1 million right now. Like, I want it to drop from the sky right now.
Mhm.
Why isn't that happening? But I wouldn't be surprised if it's like we're born with doubt. Like, the reality is the way it is because we have so much doubt inside us, and that doubt manifests itself in the way it does. And so you have to take actions to literally like overcome that doubt. I also haven't heard of like the 12 laws of like the universe. I've literally only heard of the law of manifestation. I didn't even know there was more than one.
Yeah, no, there's 12, and people only really hear of the law of attraction, which is, like manifestation, but they're all important. But, you said you feel like we're born with doubt, and it's like, I think that like kids and youth are more connected than any of us. They understand this more than any of us, but it's through the education system, it's through societal conditioning. That's where the doubt comes in. If we were to tell our kids, you can create whatever the hell you want, guarantee this world would be a different place. But we are conditioned not to believe in ourselves. We are conditioned to believe that we're crazy if we try to do something outside of the norm. And, you know, people that are like, oh, I'm trying to manifest $1 million in a day. The universe doesn't care about what you want. The universe will react to the energy you're projecting. So unless you fully believe with your entire being that $1 million is going to fall from the sky, it's not going to. And that's the hard part. And that's the part that takes time. And a lot of people aren't willing to put in the time. And that's where most people kind of go, I don't want to say go wrong, but like, you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
where the disconnect is.
Yeah, totally. So with your background then in religion, do you currently like believe in Jesus?
I believe that there was potentially, you know, a dude named Jesus years ago, but I think that he would be equivalent to, you know, like Buddha, like a spiritual guru that was trying to teach us the laws of the universe. I think Jesus understood consciousness and we made him out to be something he's not, because I don't believe that God is exterior from us. We are all God. We're all a part of that like source energy, right? But essentially we're just a manifestation of that. I think all of the answers are within, like heaven and hell, I think reside within us. I don't think there's a place in the sky that's heaven and there's a place down under that's hell. I think the religious views are very skewed, but I also don't think that that's a coincidence.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, it's I asked just because there's so many like trips going about, which, you know, I was saying to you how like it's really common for people to have that, you know, running through the streets naked sort of thing. Aligned with that is this awakening as God sort of thing. It's like for me, it did feel like I had woken up as God and like realized like, you know, I am creating my reality as God, and that's what we're all doing, and that's what's happening to these people when they trip is they're just realizing, you know, their visuals are going like hectic and and changing their reality in front of their eyes. And they're like, how is this possible? And something just clicks in their brain where they're like, holy crap, I'm God. Like, I'm the God that I've been learning about, you know? And it's like, that's why I asked about Jesus, is because I almost feel like there may have been these moments in time where somebody just gets it, you know, like somebody just like Buddha, and like, I mean, there's probably a whole bunch of people who have gotten it that we just don't hear about. And, you know, nothing, it's like everything, reality is just water off a duck's back sort of thing to them. Like they completely are in touch with that God self. I wonder, do you reckon when you like, if you access that state, like what do you reckon reality looks like from that like headspace?
You mean when you think that you're God? Is that
Not when you feel in touch with like that, I guess the
like the
independence,
flow?
yeah, that flow that God state gives you.
Oh man. I think that it's like liberation. Do you know what I mean? Like complete liberation. When you take back your power fully, because essentially that's what it is. When you get to the place where you're like, when you awaken to the fact that you are God, because I believe that we are all God, essentially, we give our power away by praising exterior beings. We're giving our power away when we have that power. And when you take that power back, you will change your life. Your life will change, period. That's been my experience. Like my life has completely changed, and everybody has the power to do that. But it's a matter of finding that within yourself first. And until you do that, it's going to be harder to get there. And same with manifestation. Like your manifestations will start to come in so much easier when you're in alignment. Essentially, it's becoming in alignment and reclaiming your power. Like some of what I thought I wanted before, like my past manifestations, after I became in alignment, I realized that that's not actually what I was trying to manifest was not actually what was in alignment with me. And now that I'm in alignment, my manifestations are coming in so much faster because it's like it clicked. There's still obviously struggles and this and that, and you know, life is life. We're human. We're having this human experience, but it's just, I guess, liberation. Does that answer your question?
No, 100%. Like I don't know. I really kind of like needed to hear it at the moment. I feel like I'm in a good place, but also at the same time, it's almost like for me, I found when you start getting the things that you want, they almost can be in themselves like traps. I don't know if you've gone through this, but like for me, there have been a lot of goals I've had and a lot of things that I've wanted to manifest, and they've, started coming through recently. And as soon as they've come through, I've been like, okay, I got to hold on to these things now. Like I don't want to let them go, sort of thing. And so I'm at, in that moment right now where I'm just kind of letting it go. And there are other things that I also kind of want to do and want to express myself with. Like it's a really exciting time, but at the same time, there's also fear and doubt that comes up. So no, I needed to hear that personally. The messages that you channel, where do you feel like they come from then? And are they along like the same lines? Like,
That's a good question because so I've been developing my mediumship as well. And mediumship, being a medium, it's like I'm like the middle ground from like spirit to like the human, right?
mm,
And with mediumship, I can channel from like, I guess, different beings. I don't know how else to call it. Like I'll do a reading for somebody where I'm connecting with their past loved one, for example. And it's specifically as a human spirit, like somebody who passed over. And then some of these bigger messages that I get, and I'm starting to get chills. I don't know exactly what they're from, but I know that they're not from a human spirit. And I don't know if it's angels, spirit guides. I think us humans like to put labels on things, and I
yeah,
don't think that does the spirit realm justice. So I just call it spirit. I just say message from
nice.
spirit. It's essentially something that I'm tapping into that's giving me these messages, whatever they are. Yeah, so I don't really know, but I know it's greater than me. I know that I can't fully comprehend it in this human form. And I don't expect to be able to comprehend it. Like we came here and we chose to forget, because if we
Yeah,
remembered everything, we wouldn't learn what we came here to learn.
yeah, I agree.
I know we're running up on an hour here. So I'm going to ask
Hmm.
if you want to share any crazy psychedelic experience or anything in the realm of psychedelic experiences. Like this could be a story, a takeaway, whatever, something that we can leave the audience with.
I think my favorite thing that has come from my psychedelic trips, which I think is something I'm still definitely integrating. And I think it's something that we as a society are going to be integrating and are integrating currently. It all kind of happens, together. Like metaphysical discoveries, psychedelic discoveries, they all happen like in alignment, sort of thing. And I think for me, the most beautiful message I received from these trips is that there's no reason to fear death. It's like death isn't even a thing. And I think when you can really integrate that, I think it quells like so much fear in your normal life as well. My DMT trip that I was talking about before, when I like became that white light, it was incredibly intense. It was like the experience, that white light, it wasn't in this time. There was no time there. There was absolutely no time there. And so, you know, it was kind of like beyond duality. It was everything and nothing at the same time. And I remember like literally these entities like took me there, and then I became one of these entities before becoming the white light. And as one of these entities, we all kind of like were together, and we just decided, you know what? We're thinking ourselves into existence. Let's just stop thinking it. And then we just stopped thinking ourselves into existence. And then that's when like I felt like ego death came in and just became this white light. I think that's kind of like very similar to a lot of people's near death experiences. And I think it's probably what a lot of people would call like heaven. And it's so beautiful. And literally, when I came out of it, as I was saying to you, I was running through the streets naked again. Well, that was just me coming back into a memory. And literally, when I realized it was a memory, my whole reality transformed into another memory. And I was literally just jumping from memory to memory, as, looking like I was in my body in these memories, just as I am right now. And eventually it transformed to me being on the couch, just, sitting next to my friend with the DMT pipe. And I was like, am I still in a memory? Like, I really don't know. And so I feel like we've kind of already died, like this is the afterlife at the same time. And, it's kind of, I think it's a beautiful thing to realize that I don't think there is death. There is nothing to be afraid of. Like as life, you will only experience life. And because of that, you can just do whatever you want. You don't have to be afraid anymore. You're completely free, completely safe.
Thank you. I think that's super important to hear. It's interesting, for those listening, not that I had the same experience as you because I didn't, but on a mushroom trip of mine, I had a similar experience, not necessarily the white light, but I was at a place where I was nothing and everything all at once. I was okay if I died in that second.
Right.
That sounds so weird, but I fully accepted death in that moment, as morbid as that sounds.
No, it's beautiful. Well, it is funny though, because that everything and nothing, it's like, I think people do forget, if everything is connected, then like there's no, what would you say, like boundary. You can't be on the outside of everything and say that's a thing. Like there is no single thing. There's nothing. If everything is connected, then everything is nothing. And so like, it's beautiful because it's like, that's why I think some people call this heaven the void as well. It's like, it's just complete like peace or something like that. I think that's where everything comes from. I feel like that is like the source, and it's like that's what we're born from. And literally,
like we are source. And that reminds me of what I was going to say. Like you were saying, you don't believe in death. Neither do I. I think that when we quote unquote die, life is a game. That was a whole other message that came through to me, but that's, neither here nor there. But when it's game over here, we're going back home.
Right.
We're going essentially where we came from. Like it's a goodbye to this experience, but that's all that this was an experience for growth. And when we get to the other side, we're going to realize how insignificant some of the things that we stress out about are. That was my perspective on my old career. I was stressing out about, but it gives me security, this and that. And I'm like, what the hell? Why was I stressing about literally nothing?
Right. Yeah.
It feels like it's my whole life. Like it feels like it's everything that I've worked towards. When I was able to gain perspective on the mushrooms, I was like, it's literally so insignificant. It's like I could squish it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Before I forget, though, one thing I will say as well with the psychedelic trips is there's these really beautiful messages that will come through. Sometimes they come through, I think, in metaphors. Like as you were saying, you don't like to label these like experiences and stuff. And I think that's one thing just to be mindful of. That's something I had to learn early days as well, is the experiences you go through will feel like really literal. Sometimes I think they are just kind of translating a message to us a lot of the time. Like I did a trip report on my TikTok, mushroom trip report. It got taken down, unfortunately. But it was a really like, I loved the trip report. It was like about a guy who took 5 grams of mushrooms in silent darkness. And then he woke up all of a sudden because he started meditating on it, and then just woke up in hospital. And then, but the hospital wasn't like a normal hospital. It was like light, and he could feel his like friends and family around him. But they were like these, they were kind of like his friends and family, but he couldn't quite see their faces. They were just like sources of light. And they were explaining to him, they were like, you've literally been in a coma your whole life, and we've just given you a drug that's pulled you out of the coma, and now you're realizing your whole life was just imagined as you're in this coma. And and it felt literally realer than real for him, and he felt like he was being reunited with his friends, his family, and it was like this extreme unconditional love that he felt from them. But then I think he slipped back into his body, and then again he like came back out. But when he came back out this time, just like you were saying, life is a game, he literally took off the VR headset this time and was like surrounded by friends, and his friends were like, how was it, man? Like, what was it like? And he was like, yeah, that was insane. That was absolutely real as. And obviously I think these are just like metaphors kind of like what's going on. And
No, 100%. And that's important to note too. It's not like he was literally in a coma, but essentially in my opinion, they were showing him like, this is just an experience. You're going to wake up to where you're really from when this experience is over. Thank you again so much for taking the time. I know this is going to be an interesting episode. I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say about it. I'll make sure that I have all of your social medias and all of that linked in the description box below. For those of you that are interested, you should definitely give Jack a follow. His TikTok is just full of these stories. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check it out. But yeah, thanks again so much for your time. And thanks to those listening here with us today. But until next time, bye guys.
This is me, I'm so royal, and you all wanna be round. born a champion, a champion.